Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Boots to Boardroom podcast hosted by the Catalyst program. I'm your host, Stacy, and today we have Jacob. Jacob, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Did you get snow last night where you are?
Yeah, we got like 3-4 inches.
Nice. Same.
Not really. I mean, I'd rather it not snow at the end of April.
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of unexpected, but hey, whatever.
gotta do what you gotta do. All right, so Jacob, if you want to jump right into it, do you want to talk about, how much have we talked about in the last few podcasts? We don't really know much about Jacob at all, I don't think.
I think just the military experience, right? But I don't really...
Like, we haven't dug into anything at all. So do you want to start maybe with, did you join the military right from high school?
Right, so that's pretty much what happened. About 1 month after I graduated high school, I went right in. It's 2003, so it was kind of the ramping up of everything. You know, we had gone into Afghanistan in 2002. Most people in my small class in Texas, I think there were 67 of us graduated in my small Texas town. I want to say somewhere around 15 of us went into the military.
Oh, wow. I feel like that's a lot of people from a graduating class to go straight to the military.
Right, so I think me and a couple of my buddies who I think we were always planning on going to the military, we may have inadvertently recruited some of them.
Nice. Nice.
They would ask us where we were going. You know, we all had jobs and still worked and, you know, after school and whatnot. But we would go to our recruiting meetings. We were in the delayed entry program. For all you out there, you definitely know what that means, DEP or whatever they called it. And, you know, we'd tell people this is what we were doing. This is what we were planning. And
What is delayed entry program?
It's where you more or less commit to joining the military before you actually enlist, before they ship you off to MEPS, excuse me. So you go to the recruiter. It's like a once a month sort of thing. I feel like it's been a while. But we would go do these meetings where we might, do PT, or they'd give us some advice and they'd kind of prepare us for boot camp.
So it's like a little preparation kind of thing once a month before you really fully commit?
Yeah, I suppose. It was kind of like this informal thing, I believe. I mean, nothing really necessarily prepares you for boot camp unless you happen to be, unfortunately, like, the son or daughter of a military instructor, in which case they make a point to show you how it is. But yeah. I don't know. It's not
Thankfully,
my
my parents were never instructors. I wasn't making beds and shining boots.
Well, my parents were fairly strict as far as discipline goes, so I think that probably helped prepare me. It wasn't such a shock when I went there.
Right. Do you think it was a shock to any of your friends?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, there were a lot of deer in the headlights. I mean, you all get that experience the first night. For me, I think we arrived at like 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, God.
And, yeah, I went, so I grew up in Texas, and the MEPS facility was in Dallas. Dallas, Texas, and so I joined the Air Force. So San Antonio was my destination. Well, they put me on a bus and drove me down there.
Oh gosh.
So, that was a long quiet drive, and I didn't know this at the time, but it was going to be like one of those times to relax and mentally prepare. For me, it was just a bus ride.
Right.
But they got us out there like early in the morning, and everyone was kind of waiting for everyone to start yelling at you. I think you could kind of feel that, and suddenly it started happening. Where they're kind of jumping all over people and telling them to pile in and do this and do that, and you're like, okay, now it's officially started. I'm here.
Here we are.
Yep, I did it. I enlisted.
And so the delayed entry, how long was it from graduating high school to when you were in boot camp?
Oh, so I think, why are you asking me this? 2021. This was like, 2003?
Or was it like a year
Good
or like
Lord.
a couple of months? I'm just trying to think, how old were you? Like, were you guys all like 18 at the time?
No. I mean, it was a various age group, right? So, I mean, to get right down to it, I mean, I grew up in Hamilton, Texas, I graduated there. I didn't grow up there. I was only there for a couple of years. But Hamilton's a very small community, and a couple hours away was Brownsville, or not Brownsville. What's that town called? Something Brown. There's a college there.
Don't ask the Canadian. I'm not going to know.
Yeah, no, I don't remember. Brownwood, maybe? I don't know. It's been so long. I don't ever go back to Texas anymore, unfortunately. But anyway, I mean, that's where I drove down for my recruiting meetings, and it was comprised of, some kids, were maybe in college, and then the rest of us were fairly young. But there were
Right.
a couple of people there that enlisted that were older, but I can't really tell you. I want to say I went into delayed entry in like November, and then I officially enlisted like June of like the following year.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to imagine like your first, or my first year of university. When I look back, it's like, wow, I was such an immature, dumb kid that knew nothing. And I'm imagining the same thing, joining boot camp, but like how terrible it would feel, because you're still kind of like a teenager who you think you know things sometimes, and how difficult that might have been, as a younger, not even in your 20s maybe, kid being yelled at and told for the first time to do chores a certain way, although you said your parents were kind of strict, so maybe you were more used to that kind of stuff. But
Well, I mean, my stepfather was a lot older than I was, a lot older than my mother. He was 18 years older than my mother. Of course, I was born when she was 18, so he's like a different generation. He's a baby boomer. He's 36 years my senior, and so he believed in, getting a job when I was like 11 or 12, and I'm like, why do I need that? And they're like, well, if you want to buy the nice pair of shoes you want, then you can get a job because, I provide you base. It was something that I think as a teenager, I want to rebel and do that sort of thing. But later on, I greatly appreciated that because I think it did shape me. He held me accountable and made me want to achieve things, made me set goals. If you want this particular car, if you want this, then you need to go earn money to get it. That certainly prepped me. It wasn't anytime you get yelled at and someone gets in your face, you're going to have that moment where it's like this, you're going to tense up or you're going to, attack or whatever. As a young kid, it's easier, I think, really, because they get in your face, you're like, oh, well, this is real. And, maybe there's something to learn from this, or you just don't know what to do.
right.
I always joke now and say I could never go back through there because someone got in my face, I'd get right back in theirs. I've changed, but, I was on the other side of it at that point, yelling at people when I became an NCO and, coming down on people hard if I needed to, but trying not to be that particular person. But the military culture is and can be a bit of an animal, I think, depending on how you're grown up. And I know it's all changed, and generationally they'll say, oh, when I had guys whenever I first arrived on station, fast forward a year, they were like, you don't know how soft it is now, how easy. And I'm like, we're at war, like it doesn't seem easy at all. But
Right.
it was just a different environment. Of course, when I got out, I was like, you guys have it easy.
Yeah.
We fought for a decade, and you guys don't. You're coming in now. You're too late.
Yeah, I hear you on
So
that.
it's like this pass it on thing. It's funny.
And it is so different though with the military, because it's not like you're prepping for a corporate office. You're prepping to go overseas and go to war. You're not in a typical situation once you do go somewhere with the military. So I'm not saying that type of culture is necessarily good or bad, but it's easier to get away with the military because there are no rules once you leave the country. In a way.
Well, I mean,
like you're going to have to expect to have certain situations come up that aren't going to be all perfect and politically correct, and you kind of want them to raise your adrenaline a little bit, because if you didn't have any of that and then went somewhere and then you had somebody else yelling in your face, or you're in a stressful situation and you've never really had that adrenaline rush of like, oh my God, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of people angry and whatever else, I think it would be harder to be balanced whenever you went anywhere.
Well, I think it's important to remember that when you go to basic training, no matter the branch or whatever, they're going to break you down and reshape you in what they need you to be. I think that's the point of it. That's why the Marines have the Crucible, and they all have their different programs, and they're all varying degrees of what they need to be. So for me, like whenever I went in, like the Air Force basic training, they focused on having your socks and your shirts folded neatly and in this precise way and so many inches, and it was all this level of detail, right? And it was all ridiculous to us. And so we had these tricks where we had our laundry bags. Well, we put all of our clean clothes on top of the dirty ones in the laundry bag, and then we put our showroom stuff in the lockers. So we really lived out of the laundry bag so that we could always have that inspection ready. Everything was inspection. Yeah, like a year later, they got rid of that, and they're like, just roll them up and throw them in there. We don't give a shit about that. Yeah, it all changed because they shifted from attention to detail to battle ready, we're at war sort of thing. So the military adjusts, and if anything, I'd argue that the corporate transition, yeah, I guess it would be tough to transition from your military training, but it does prepare you for what you'll encounter there, right? So I would argue
for sure.
that they were breaking you down to mold you into what they needed you to be. Which for me, and when I went in, it was getting ready for OIF and OEF, and while I was in basic training, I volunteered again to go through the TACP selection. Because you had to do that, that was a voluntary thing. I went in general elective, general electric or something, knowing that I was going to go try out for that. I'd wanted to do TACP from the moment I found out about it, almost a year earlier, right?
All right,
So there's
wait.
a little bit of difference for me. Like
I
I
was gonna
wanted.
say, go back a hot second. Did you just say IOF or EOF?
OIF, OEF,
Oh,
Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom, Iraq and Afghanistan.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. I don't know all the abbreviations yet. I'm catching up myself as a civilian.
Now, here's another one, GWAT, the Global War on Terrorism.
Okay, yeah, all right, there we go. Thanks.
All the things, right? All the things.
All the things. So then you joined the military. Your plan was to go into General Electric.
So, no, I mean, my plan was always to go be TACP, which is what it ended up being.
And
right?
TACP is Tactical
Air Control Party.
Air Control Party.
Right, yeah. I think it's the only AFSC, Air Force Specialty Code. Why are you making me do all these acronyms?
Well, because I actually don't know a lot of them, so it's helpful.
Right.
There's some civilians listening,
All right. So AFSC, TACP. I was told it was the only one that had party in its name, so that was like a little ha-ha thing. All right. So, I mean, I backtrack a year while I was in school. Remember, I went into the late entry program. Well, I started researching. I wanted, because I was a young, dumb kid, right? I wanted to go fight. That's what,
Yep.
You're young, that's what you want to do. And my brothers, I had a brother-in-law who was in the Army who retired as a Chinook Chief Warrant Officer 4. I had the other two brothers, which are step-related, which are older, of course. Mm-hmm. They were Navy and Marines. And all of them were like, go do the Air Force, mainly because, they seem to treat you better. That's what we always heard. And, no one, we don't have an Air Force person in our little group here. A fun fact, my younger brother's actually still in the Coast Guard, so we have covered all 5 of them.
You got it all.
But, I went in, I'm like, well, fine. If you want me to join the Air Force, I'm going to go find something to do that's combat. So I did. I looked up combat controller, pararescue, TACP. I didn't like swimming. I didn't want to swim. So that pararescue kind of went out because they had scuba, and then CCT kind of was on the fence about that, but I wanted to do combat stuff, and that's what TACP did. They called in airstrikes. Sounded cool. I wrote a paper, an English paper, on TACP when I was in high school.
Nice.
So, I mean, when I went to basic training, I would already been training. I was a track runner. I ran miles upon miles, and that was just me. I wanted to be. I was kind of prepped for that. Of course, I was always like a little kid, though. I was like 5'6", 117 pounds, I think, when I went in.
Oh my God.
2 pounds over the minimum waiver requirement, right?
Yeah, that is skinny.
So I go in, I go and do my Air Force PT test, and then I convert it to an Army one because that was what they judged it off: push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run, pull-ups. And because I weigh nothing, I run like a 10-minute, or a little under 11-minute 2-mile, which is very fast.
Wow, that is fast.
Right. So I do that. I do like 80 push-ups and sit-ups in 2 minutes, and I do like 36 pull-ups or something, whatever. It was a lot. It was, but I weighed nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so it was funny because it shaped my conversation when I got to TACP, because of course they selected me. And in the last week of basic training, I came down with an ear infection, and I couldn't go in and do anything about it. And I let it go, and it actually ended up rupturing my ear for the first time.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a perforated, the infection was nasty.
Yes.
And it probably didn't help I got on a plane and flew down to Florida with it.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was not good. So I got there and I was really messed up, and they were trying to get me to do this PT test, and I couldn't hear them. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen Archer, the show, but he's like mop mop. He's like touching his ear. That was me, and they're like, who? They're like, this guy's supposed to be this stud, and this scrawny kid comes over and he can't even do a PT test. He's ignoring us, and I'm like, I'm in a lot of pain, and so they're like, oh, you weakling, get out of here. So they sent me, to the sick call, and they came back. I came back, and I had like, this is kind of gross, but I had like orange stuff coming out of my ear. Like, it was bad.
Well, you would if it was, yeah.
It was really bad. I should not have done what I did.
God.
So I come back and I give them the breakdown, and they're like, holy shit, you weren't messing around. You have an inner ear infection. Your eardrum's ruptured. You flew down here like that. Okay. So they were like, well, the first week is just the history of TACP. You don't need to be in class as long as you do the readings and you show that whatever, because I was confined to quarters, like for like 5 days.
Right.
They're like, fine, just read the books, show up on Monday. You have to take the test, or we'll wash you out. And I was like, okay. So I got better. I went and did the PT test, and I ran the 2 mile in like 13 and a half minutes, which was like the worst time I had run in ever.
Yep.
And I even like threw up a couple of times on the way. I was just like, I'm gonna finish. And I did well enough. I mean, I scored high enough that they were just like, it was kind of like some grudging respect. They're like, this little like scrawny kid, like he's here and he's throwing up like off the course and keeps running. Like maybe he's, it's
Maybe he's
okay.
not cut out for this.
No,
or
they were
maybe he's okay because he's really
yeah. They were
making
like,
it through.
damn, no quit to
Yeah.
this kid, and that's the way it was, and I got through it. I mean, it was just a funny experience. And then like a year later, I think I was in like Fallujah, and then my eardrum was ruptured again, but for very different reasons. So.
Oh man! All right, yeah. So then now you obviously made it through basic training. What was next?
In the TACP school, like I went through
TACP.
that, and then they sent me. I did it all wrong. Like I went through basic training in San Antonio in like June, July, August, which was horrible.
Oh yeah.
And then I went to Florida, and that was a little bit better because it was turning into fall. But that was a lot of trudging around with rucksacks with weights in them that sometimes weighed as much as I do. Mm-hmm. But by the time I'd gotten to survival school, they sent me directly to survival school. I had gained like 40 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to put on a lot of weight while I was there.
As you say, you must have been eating constantly because I am 5 foot. I'm 5'4.5", and I'm 110 pounds. And that's really tiny for a woman. You were 5'6", 5'7", and you were 117 pounds. Like, that is so skinny.
Yeah, I was nothing. I was a beanpole, like a scrawny little kid. And, like I said, I think I gained, when I left there, I was about a little under 160. So, yeah, a good amount of weight that I put on. And then I went to survival school, which is Fairchild, Washington, and it was December. So there was feet of snow on the ground, and we had to do the stupid survival school stuff out there, and that was miserable.
So what is survival school like? Like, what does that entail?
So I did the resistance training portion where they do the survival stuff, where they teach you, I watched a lady try to kill a rabbit by like hitting it with a stick and broke its back, and they screaming everywhere, and
Wait,
it's just
what?
like, yeah. So like it's funny because remember, I grew up in a country. This is for all you people out there now appalled. Hold on, let me refine this conversation here. When you're in survival school and you're out there, they give you a rabbit, and they're like, go ahead and name it and do all this. No, and I'm like, we're gonna eat that rabbit. Like,
Yeah.
I know this.
Oh my God.
Like, I know this. We're eating that rabbit. That rabbit looks good. But for all the people who had never grown up in hunting and fishing and all the things that I did, they didn't know. So, we've got a group of like pilots, female, male, and all these people, and then the TACP guys, and they're naming it, and I'm like playing along with them. I'm like, this is going to be insane. Like, keep in mind, I'm a young kid, and I'm really kind of a nice kid. I'm like, you shouldn't do that.
But yeah, it sounds a little insane.
Like I was a good kid, like a nice kid. I'm not saying the military did anything.
No,
to me.
but I mean,
well, they did, but I was a very genuine. Grew up in, like I said, it's kind of a stern Christian home, and I was like, you shouldn't name that. And they're like, shush, shush, shush. I'm like, so I'm like, okay, I'll just be quiet, And so it got to the time of where we're gonna kill Fluffy or whatever they named it,
no.
and I'm like, I'll do it. Because they're like, you got to pin its ears back and hit in the back base of the neck. Humane, just kill it.
Yeah.
I'm like, give me the stick, I'll do it. And they're like, no. They got to give it to this very nice, very young female lieutenant who is like, I don't want to do it. And they're like, you have to. So she goes to hit it.
That is soul crushing.
Right in the back, right in the middle of its back, and it just starts screaming, and they're doing a little, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a bunny rabbit, but they can make a lot of noise.
Yeah, they can.
And I was just like, oh, God. I can't, what is going on here? So they end up, putting it out of its misery, the survival people, then they're yelling at her about how she has to do it right, and the whole experience was just...
That poor girl.
Ridiculous. And it only got worse because then they captured us, and then they beat the shit out of us, and they played loud Japanese heavy metal, and the whole experience was meant to kind of, test you mentally. And
sounds like an episode of what was that zombie show? Walking Dead.
Right. So, no, I mean, I think there's an important lesson that I learned through all that is, as a young kid especially. So, as a TACP guy, they definitely they singled us out. They know who we were because every time someone did something wrong, I got punished for the group.
Oh,
I always
wonderful.
got punished. Yeah, I know. I was the house bitch. That's what I used to. That's what they. I think they called me that too. They did, but what they did is they took humanity out of it. You didn't have hands, you had hooves. You didn't have a name, you had a number.
Right.
And they did all this because it's very true. It's how you get these terrible things human beings can do to each other, but it was meant to give you a lesson on how this works. But, I mean, it was a weird experience, but it did kind of, you definitely learn from it, right? I still remember some of the things they taught us for that reason.
Right. It kind of actually sounds like what you're saying about your stepdad, where it's like, as a young person getting a job at 11, like you didn't really want to do it at the time, but you're glad you did it after, especially as an adult. So it sounds like survival school is kind of one of those things where in the moment kind of probably sucks, but it's something that definitely taught you a lot and like stuff that you had to know.
Well, life's like a marathon, right? I mean, and it's a collection of experiences, and I've had to learn that as I've gone through it. I think if there's one lesson I'd want to impart, is that the experiences that you have, like it's always best to try to put a learning perspective on it to see. The military certainly taught me that. I was in a lot of shitty situations that kind of, it molds you or it breaks you, but make it an experience you learn from.
For sure. Okay, so then you make it through survival school. How much time has passed at this point? Has it been a year from beginning to end of survival school?
A year and a half. From basic training to the end. And see, that was also in between. So they captured us, they beat the hell out of us, then they came back and they made fun of us and showed us all the things we did wrong. And we're like, cool. And they're like, now we're going to send you back out again. And in between that, actually, is when they caught Saddam Hussein. And I remember that because it was just, I remember watching it on the news. And I'm like, whoa. I kind of thought to myself, like, are we still going to be in Iraq now? Right?
Right.
And 10 years later, I'm like, yeah, we definitely were because I kept going back over there. But at the time, I'm like, is it over? Right?
Yeah.
But
I think the whole world probably thought that.
Yeah, and that was just like something that sticks out in my mind was sitting there like eating a good meal and like still cold because it was, freezing out there. In the hotel room now though, like the little, place that and I was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing?
Yeah. So that's really interesting. The timing of that, that's crazy. And then how long from then, you're in or finishing up survival school, did you go to Iraq pretty soon after that?
So that was December, and in August of next year, I was in Iraq. So like 8 months.
Wow. And how many times did you go to Iraq?
4 times to Iraq and once to Afghanistan.
Nice. Wow. And once to Afghanistan?
Yeah, the last one. Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, so I have so many questions about all of that. So then the first time you go to Iraq, I liked hearing about Blake on the last week's podcast, or last week's podcast. His first, day moments arriving in Iraq for the first time. How did you feel when you're arriving?
So the first thing that I remember actually was landing in IUD. So the Air Force rotates into IUD, or they did. That was like the air base entry point into Iraq, and that's down in Qatar. Mm-hmm. Qatar, 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 however you say it.
Qatar, yeah.
And the reason why I remember is because, keep in mind, this was August, summer,
right?
In like one of the hottest places on this planet.
Yep.
And we landed, we flew in, we had come in through Germany. And I remember we landed, and I'll never forget this, the pilot was like, the current local time is 3:05 a.m. The current temperature is 97 degrees, and the humidity is 75%. And I was like, there's no way that that's true. Like, it can't be. And as soon as I stepped off the plane, I was like, good God, this place is terrible.
And were you wearing like full, you would have been wearing, no shorts when you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, there were no shorts. No. We were in full uniform. DCUs, desert camouflage, the old ones, because, I'm dating myself here. But we had to do a bag drop, so we had to pull everything off the plane and sort it. And I was just like, this is horrible. And they're like, hurry up. The sun comes up early here. I'm like, hey, it's not even up yet, right? And so we get it all off the plane, and then they hustle us over to our place to stay before the sun comes up because it's going to be like 120 degrees that day.
Gosh.
And we stayed there for a couple of weeks. And when we finally got to Baghdad, because that's where I flew in, I remember in Baghdad it was like around 100 degrees those days. But after acclimating to Satan's furnace, or whatever you want to call it, I was like, this is great. It was cool. Like, we were like, it's not so bad here. Oh. So it was interesting, right? But, 3 days later, like I was a young guy, right? So I wasn't a full JTAC yet, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller. I was what they call a ROMAD, a radio operator, maintainer, driver. More acronyms. Mm-hmm. Together we made the TACP. There you go. But my JTAC, like 3 days later, had already called in an airstrike. Like we were busy.
Right.
And then from there, I was only there for like maybe 4 months. They were rotating us on short rotations back then, but I went from Baghdad to Sadr City, which is on the northeast side of Baghdad, which anyone who's hearing this in 2004 is groaning because I went to War Eagle, and I also went to Iron Horse, which those are two different FOBs, forward operating bases, but we were getting attacked like at War Eagle, like it seemed like every 30 minutes.
Gosh.
So it was like hell, and it was a great tour, though. We had the AC-130 gunship on every night. We were using all its bullets. I mean, it was like this unreal thing.
Did it feel like you were doing exactly what you wanted to do? What you were thinking of when you joined basic training? Like, is that what you were imagining it looking like? Yes and no, somewhat, I guess.
So at Iron Horse, which was... I was at Fort Hood, by the way. That was my first assignment, which is Texas. It's an hour where I graduated from high school. Did not want to go there. Wanted to go to Germany. Went right back to Texas. It was insane. Not what I wanted. So I was with 1st Cav, 1st Cavalry Division, and we were at 1st Brigade, which is 1-1 Iron Horse. And the commander at the time of that brigade was Colonel Abrams. Should sound familiar, like the tank.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, because like his granddad was named after the tank. And his dad and his mom and his sister and his brother, they're all like generals, right? This is like one of those crazy...
That's my best friend's family in Canada. That's her family, basically.
Right. So it's like this legendary family for sure. And then you've got this guy who he was a larger than life character in the sense that he carried himself that way. You know, he came from a prestigious family, and he was really an awesome guy. But he was like, he always had like the cigar that he was chewing on. So you got this impression that he was like, he felt himself patent reincarnated or something. Yeah. And he would walk in and he'd be like, where's my AC-130? And are those hooligans? And, you know, every time we saw a pickup truck, it was a red four-door Toyota pickup truck. I'll never forget this. Keep in mind, we did most of our stuff at night, and we were using infrared, which is black or white. There is no color, right. But it was always a red one. And if we saw a red four-door pickup truck throwing tires out the back, because they light them on fire and melt the street, and then put IEDs in the road, kill them, blow it up. Always a red, I'll never forget, it's the funniest thing ever. They're always hooligans, always red four-door pickup truck.
That's crazy. So then what's a typical day look like? So you're there for 4 months. Was that, anytime you went to Iraq, was it always 4 months?
No.
It got longer and longer, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so after I did that for like half the time there, then they sent us to Fallujah for the Phantom Fury or whatever it was, the big push. And then I was there, and we just leveled that city. Like it was like the penultimate like short tour for a young guy. Because there I was calling in artillery strikes too. Like I was calling in 155s while the JTAC was calling in airstrikes. So I mean, I got to do like this crazy amount of work in a short period of time, and it was the most kinetic tour that I had. Of course, it was right at the beginning. But, I mean, I don't know the typical day. I mean, Fallujah, we didn't have running water, so I didn't take a shower for like 2 months.
Nice.
Yeah, really good with Gold Bond and a little bit of water. I still tried to shave, and I'd wash my hair with a little bit of water every day. I washed my hair every day. I did that. For the rest of it was baby wipes and Gold Bond powder.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. When did you get the shower then?
What's that?
Like, when did you get to shower before you flew home?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I remember I took 2 showers. I took a shower, and then like 10 minutes later, I'm like, I'm going to go back and take another one.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so then that was your first tour. How long was it between your first and second?
Not long. A year.
Yeah.
Then I went over for I went over there. I was supposed to do 1 year. Some of my friends got stuck there for longer. We were part of the group, supposedly, that changed the whole idea of the Air Force of doing like these standard smaller rotations because we were over there for so long and they didn't want us to be. But I actually stayed for 11 months on the second one, and they sent me back to take me to Airman Leadership School because they had already given me orders to Korea. I went to Korea to get out of Fort Hood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was my escape Fort Hood plan, was to go to Korea.
So if you went to Korea, then you could get a posting to anywhere else?
Supposedly.
Did that happen?
Yeah. Remember, I'm trying to go to Germany the whole time.
Right.
So Korea was fun. I barely remember that. I worked hard and I played hard at Korea. It was a great experience. But no, I actually ended up getting orders to Kansas, to Fort Riley.
Not Germany.
No.
Did you just say Fort Germany?
No, not to Germany.
Oh, no. Okay. I thought you said
Fort Riley.
Fort Riley. I thought you said Fort Germany, Kansas. It's like, oh, wow.
Fort really... Nowhere, Kansas.
Yeah.
The Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division.
1st Infantry Division. All right. And then, so now you've been to Iraq. Is it twice, then Korea?
Then Korea.
And then you move, and then what happens?
I go to Kansas, and then I start doing nothing but deployments like the other 3 or 4 or however many that I did.
Wow.
Yeah. Kansas was all right. It was kind of a secret gem, I think. I know there's some people that are going to be like, whatever, idiot. Everyone has different experience. But for me, the Kansas was like really okay because it was a smaller base. It wasn't Hood, which when I was there had 2 divisions, so traffic, it takes like 2 hours to get off base.
Yeah.
So it was like this nice, quiet area, right, in my life. And there was hunting and fishing and things that I liked. So I liked Kansas. And I stayed there for the rest of my career. like the 5 years or so that I was, had. So half my career was spent at Riley.
Wow. So then when I was talking to Blake last week, we were talking about the differences between Iraq and Afghanistan. And Blake, you correct me if you know, Jacob, I don't think Blake was ever in Afghanistan.
I don't know.
Sorry, Blake, if you can hear this right now and you want to answer so bad but can't. But what would you, like, from an outsider looking in, what were the differences to you, or, anything you think of that differentiates the two?
Well, so, I mean, Afghanistan was, like, beautiful, actually. And, like, I was up in Boardroom. I was up in
my mom was there.
Yeah. Right, so it's surrounded by mountains, and, like, some of them have snow on them almost all year round.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It really is a beautiful country. Iraq, southern Iraq's terrible. It's just a desert. It's the desert that they always showed us, Northern Iraq was pretty. Nineveh province into Erbil, which is where the Kurds are, the Kurdish people. That gets in the mountains, and it's pretty, and it's rolling hills in Nineveh. So there's a big contrast, at least for me, where I was at, for the scenery. The structure of the people was odd. Like Iraq, it was almost like a fairly easy to understand pyramid where you had like typically the oldest guy in the village was like the village elder, and the hierarchical structure was really a family. Like each village was more or less just a giant connected family.
Yep.
And Afghanistan, they had that sort of structure, but it was like very convoluted as far as who the leadership was. It was like a spider web.
Right.
So I know we had problems trying to figure that out, because oftentimes I was doing like private security detail, PSD, for the battalion commander, the brigade commander, flying out with them or going with them as the air support break glass in case of emergency type of role.
Wow. Yeah, what I've heard about the differences is that Iraq is kind of like, maybe like you imagine like a city, and there might be some destruction around you and stuff, but it's more of like a city, whereas Afghanistan is kind of like the
wilderness.
The wilderness. You're out in the middle of like the mountains and kind of nowhere land, But Afghanistan can be a little bit unpredictable. I mean, they're both obviously unpredictable, but I've heard that Afghanistan can be a little bit unpredictable in a unique way.
Well, the terrain was different, right? I guess you could say that, maybe you can say that Iraq was more urban, like warfare, than Afghanistan was certainly more wilderness and walking around up and down those giant mountains with all the gear that we had. That was so much fun.
Bring you back to your basic training days.
Well, I mean, in Afghanistan, you walked around a lot. You had to. And in Iraq, you more or less drove. I mean, there were like more or less two highways in Afghanistan. It was like MSR 1 and 3. Like in Iraq, there were so many of them, so many routes, right?
Yep.
So certainly more structured in Iraq as far as like infrastructure, and Afghanistan is like this warlord hive of different people. Like it's just the hierarchical structure is so different, and I think it kind of trickles down into these different types of combat, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Plus, the Afghans have been like fighting people forever in their mountains. I mean, and Iraq was more or less a sovereign nation, that was ran by a crazy person that we got rid of, and then it was like a rebuild, whereas Afghanistan was just fighting, I feel like.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've heard before from other people, which I was surprised. I always thought it was, I guess, not opposite in like the topography and stuff of the areas, but I really thought it was reversed for some reason before talking to like Blake and you and everyone else.
Think about this, like one of the tours toward the end, like the last time I was in Iraq, I think it was like 2011. Yeah, I think that's about right. Beginning of 2011 is when I left, right before everyone left, more or less. I was on the rotation before they drove down to Kuwait, so thankfully I didn't have to do that. But like most of what I did was use our aircraft to do like overwatch of like, there was this water treatment facility that we were building, so I constantly had planes over it, making sure, people weren't trying to blow it up or shooting at it or whatever. But for the most part, it died down. I think Sadr City people, the insurgents or whatever, kind of like, we're going to sit quietly and hole up and wait for them to leave. But we still were doing a lot of stuff where we were like rebuilding Iraq and trying to help get it going. So, but there was a lot of political stuff by that time as well. So, I mean, there was actually there was a really funny thing where they sent me to Warhammer. I think that's what it was, Fobhammer, which is on the southeast side of Sadr City, and there's a live range out there, a training range. And they wanted me to call in an airstrike for this joint combined live fire mission with the Iraqis, running around with their tanks and their flags and this big dog and pony show of generals to show their power, and we were there with them. And I was going to do this airstrike as like this whole parade, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was this whole thing. And they were out there on the range too, and they could only go so far to stop because I was dropping a bomb out beyond them. It was supposed to be this whole demonstration of power.
Right.
And I got there, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I just show up. Like, the battalion I was with that was out there, love these guys. I'd trained with them. I went to JRTC with them, Joint Readiness Training Center. It's a shitty place in Louisiana. Don't recommend it. But I had a good comrade. I had a good relationship with the sergeant major and the commander there, really tight. And then we got there, and then it was just such a crazy show. And there were Army generals and Air Force generals and politicians there, and they put me in like this. They put me at the very corner, the very like edge of the stadium, like tucked me into this. And when I say corner, I mean I couldn't move. Like, there were all these people surrounding me, and they're like, "All right, when they say it's time, you're going to drop this bomb." So they were doing this dry run, and I'm like, "Who says this?" And they're like, "General Hussein." I'm like,
Oh.
There's 40 of them. And I'm not kidding. There were like dozens. So the Iraqis, so they're interesting. So they all were in like these OD green type jumpsuit type things, like the old school stuff. They all had these really blinging belts. Like, I guess like anyone who's seen this laughing their asses off right now. They had like, I remember they had these massive shiny belts. And it's like, it was a status thing. The higher rank you were, the bigger and like... You know,
it's like a cowboy hat, but
like a rodeo belt buckle, right? They had these massive belt buckles, and I was just like, "What is the point of that?" And plus, I have to look down, like, you know,
in that
growing.
area.
Yeah, I'm trying to be appropriate here, and I'm just like, "This is the strangest thing." Like, these people, they're different, yes, but this is just odd. So here they are, and they're like, General Hussein. Well, when he's finished, and I'm like, I don't speak Farsi, I don't speak Arabic. I'm like, I need a translator to tell me this. And they're like, you'll figure it out. And that's what I was told by like a full bird colonel. And I'm like, yes, sir, whatever. So here we are. I've got the F-16s on station. And I'm like, I have them set up. And I'm like trying to figure out when I'm supposed to do this. And so not everyone is there. Like, not all the bigwigs, but there's a lot of them. And suddenly I realized that everyone's staring at me, and I'm like, oh, I guess it's time. So I'm like, you're in. And they're like, yeah, 30 seconds. And so it dropped like a minute later. And as soon as it was done, like this one-star general ran up to me. He's like, I'm quoting, he's like, that was fucked up. You should have dropped it in a minute earlier. And I'm like, I don't speak Arabic. And he's like, what? I'm like, I don't know when he finishes talking. I don't even know who he is. I can't see anyone. You've put me in the back here. I can't see who it is that you're speaking.
Right.
Like, do you understand where I'm at? Look.
That was fucked up, he said.
Yeah, he started yelling at me, and it was this one-star Army general, and I'm like, oh, well, hold on, Brigadier. So I'm like, stand where I am and see if you can see this guy. I'm like, I'm 5'6" too, remember? I can't see over these people. And they're like, we'll get you a translator. And I'm like,
I mean, based on like him coming over and even being able to get that point across, like, could he not have stood there or like gave you the thumbs up or something, from a distance?
Right. So it was someone had gotten upset. So then it trickled down until it got to lowly Staff Sergeant me, and he's yelling at me, and I'm like, it does no good for you to yell at me.
Right.
I don't care.
You're like, I don't have to be here.
Yeah, fire me and put someone else here. Don't twist my arm. I'm not getting anything out of this. You're not going to pin a medal on me. The Iraqis aren't going to bring one of their awesome blingy belts and hand it to me. It's nothing. Like, I'm nothing. ignored here.
I mean, that'd be pretty cool though if they did give you a blingy belt to take on.
Well, that's what I was secretly hoping. I'm like, maybe they'll give me one of those things. That'd be cool.
That would
I'd
be
wear
cool.
it. I'd wear it underneath my my uniform, as long as, no one saw it.
Yeah.
But it was so weird because they came yelling at me. I'm just like, look, stand where I am and figure this out. And they're like, they stop because they're like,
Honestly, though, it sounds kind of scary. Like, I think I'd be pretty nervous even just being. They're obviously like you're on their side, they're on your side type thing. But I'd be a little freaked out with all those high ups there and knowing where you are, and I would be a little.
Oh, for like a fratricide, I mean, we had in Afghanistan especially where our supposed allies turned the weapons on us. It happened some at the, what do they call them? JSS, the Joint Service Stations, and I was at a couple of those in Baghdad on my second, third tour, where, we were with them, and of course we didn't trust them. But not here, because it was on a military base that was enclosed,
right?
And there were so many people around with guns. I mean, I still had my weapon with me. But it was just this odd experience where I'm like, what do you want me to do? So they gave me a translator. I actually asked them to move too, because I was like, I'm 5'6", I can't see over these people. They put me in a position where I could see, and I had the guy talking to me, and the translator was actually an Iraqi JTAC.
Oh.
So he spoke English because he had come over. It's a requirement for our international JTAC community to speak English, both as a pilot and as a controller, since it's like the accepted language.
Yep.
So all of these guys, there were like 5 of them, they all came and hang out with me afterwards, picked my brain about, most of them were fairly new JTACs coming back from the States. But, I had a really cool conversation with their guys. And it was really telling because he helped me. He was like, all right, now he's finishing his speech. So, and when we did the real live fire, it was like almost perfect. So
nice.
Everyone was happy.
That's pretty cool.
But afterwards, they were like, this was really telling to me, and it kind of shaped my thinking for the whole drawdown, is they were like, you guys can't leave. We're not ready.
They said that to you?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, the JTACs, and they had their commander come over who spoke some English, and he thanked me, and he's like, really wish you guys wouldn't leave. We're not ready. They didn't even have planes. They were JTACs they didn't have their jets yet. They ended up getting F-16s a little later on, but they got like a quarter of what they were supposed to get.
Right.
And I remember thinking, in 3 to 5 years, this is going to go to hell again. Mm-hmm. And I really felt bad about that because like 2 years later, ISIS is just wreaking havoc in the north, right?
Yes.
Because or maybe 3 years. It was not long after, not even a year, I think, after we left, and then suddenly that was happening. I was like, oh God, why could I be so right?
Yeah. Oh, that's tough.
So.
So then, when was your last tour? Was Afghanistan, and what year was that? Do you remember?
Yeah. So I got out in 2013, and that was most of 2012 into 13. Like I got back home from Afghanistan, and then I was just out processing out of the military.
So was that kind of a planned thing, or were you just after being on so many tours, you're like, this is enough, I gotta, what was your why kind of behind that? Was it always the plan, or were you...
Well, I did 6 years initially, and then at the time that I could re-enlist, which was like 2007 or so, I don't remember exactly. No, 2008, excuse me, I don't know what I'm thinking. I went in 2003. So in 2008, I was up for re-enlistment, and at that time, it was like the surge, 7 to 8, we were going into the surge, which was this big push in Iraq. So they were like begging us to stay in. So they were going to give me a combat zone tax exclusion for my re-enlistment, and they were going to give me a really hefty bonus. Mm-hmm. Really hefty. I'm not going to say it. It'll piss some people off if I tell them how much they pay me to stay in for like 4 years. But that and the GI Bill was being upgraded that year to the new one, the post 9/11. So I had a bunch of people rightfully telling me to stay in to get the benefit because I was going to qualify for it if I'd stayed, which was the smartest thing I did in the military.
Nice.
So I re-enlisted for 4, knowing I was going to get out at 10, which I did. So it was always planned. And then, I actually had met my wife when I was in Kansas, and funny, not so funny story is like we had planned this wedding, and I, as a fiance, had to go to her and ask her to move it back a week or two after she had set everything up. This was a few months before, because they had moved my Afghanistan orders up by like 2 months.
Oh, so like you had to leave earlier?
Right. So I got married, and 5 days later I went to Afghanistan.
Oh, that's like classic what you kind of imagine in like a movie about soldiers.
Well, I was like, oh God, she's gonna kill me.
Oh,
Like,
she's
I don't
probably
want to have
so
to.
sad.
Well, they told me my boss brought me in. He's like, your orders got moved up to this date. I'm like, that's my wedding. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, are you going to tell her? Because I'm not.
Yeah.
My wife is from Michigan, and she like kind of a city girl. She grew up in Saginaw, and so different life. But, and I had actually taught her how to shoot a gun. She was terrified of firearms. I taught her how to shoot a pistol and a handgun. She had gotten her CHL by this point, her concealed handgun. I'm like, she's got her carry license now. Like, I taught her how to shoot. She's going to kill me. Like, you go tell her. And he's like, I will if you want. I'm like, I'm just messing with you. I got to do this. But she's a courageous and wonderful person who accepted it. It did 2 tours with me. So very lucky, but yeah, very rough conversation to have with your soon-to-be wife.
Yeah, that must have been. Well, and I mean, with a wedding too, it's not like that's something that's you can move really easily with guests and, catering, or, whatever you had planned.
Well, the venue, right?
Venue, exactly.
She had it all figured out, and she had it all scheduled. And luckily, they were able to move it back a week.
No charge or anything?
No.
Nice.
We were just fortunate enough to keep everything the same.
Nice.
So, had it not been, I don't know if I'd be alive today.
Oh, that's good. Sounds like an awesome woman. All right, so then you go through, you do it, you go to Afghanistan, you come back, you knew you were going to get out, you get out, and then what happens?
Right, so I got back, my wife and I started looking at where we wanted to go, and we started we brought out a map of the U.S. and we started Xing places that we didn't want to go,
Yep.
canceling states and regions.
Like
we don't want to go to the Northeast, we don't want to go to the West Coast, none of our families at either one of those places, it's too crowded. I didn't want to go back to Texas, I was tired of the heat anyway, so I was like, well, what works? And we settled on North Carolina. Sunshine, nice weather.
Beautiful there.
Yes. And we have friends in Charlotte. And we ended up moving to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is in the Triad. Because she actually ended up, she's a veterinarian. She's going to kill me for saying this.
Why? That's amazing.
Because she doesn't want people to know, because every time my friends figure that out, they just start hounding me and then asking her for advice on dogs.
Oh, yeah, I feel that, because my husband's an eye surgeon, and I get the same thing.
Right,
he
right.
gets the same thing.
And my wife, God bless her, she's just like, you know what? They can pay if they want my advice.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why she went to school for so long.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's a veterinarian. Sorry, honey, if you're. Hopefully, you'll never listen to this. And actually, so she got hired by Banfield. She had we met the year that she was doing some externships, and she actually got her degree in veterinary medicine. I was in Iraq, so I missed her graduation. Oh. So she stuck around anyway, but we decided to, like I said, to go to North Carolina, and she had gotten in with Banfield, which is a massive veterinary corporate business, right? Mm-hmm. They're in all the PetSmarts.
Oh, wow.
So the cool thing about Banfield, though, is they're like, brand new doctor and all that. They actually paid to move all of our stuff to North Carolina.
Wow.
Right. So she had to do like a 1-year contract or something. But I didn't have to go to the military to do that. And they paid us, they just wrote a check for us.
Nice.
So we went to Winston-Salem, and that first year, all I did was double down on school. I was almost halfway done with my bachelor's when I got out. Mm-hmm. In like about 13 months, I completed the other 70 credit hours or so to get my bachelor's done. Mm-hmm. So I was a full-time student. like 8 hours a day.
Wow. Oof.
Well, I wanted to get back into the workforce. I was restless, but it was the perfect move for me because I was a little rough around the edges, I guess. I was not ready to integrate back into civilian society, if you will.
Yep.
So playing video games, playing golf, going to school was probably the best thing I could have ever done to kind of help me unwind.
Yep.
Sitting in my basement, you know,
Yep.
away from the public.
I mean, we
Because
laugh about it, but like you have to give yourself that time after coming back. You know, I don't know that from my personal experience as the person coming back, but you know, with family members and my parents, and that being my whole entire job of working alongside those people when they come back and their families. Like it is just a necessary thing you have to do.
right, so I needed some mental reprieve for sure because it was just I was worn out. I was tired of the military. I was obviously a little bit angry, I think, over the entirety of it. The last tour to Afghanistan, like I didn't do much. I just kind of I was more or less a teacher that ran a program for all the JTACs coming in. So they all rotated through my office at division. They kind of gave me they gave me a final tour, but they were like, thanks, this is an easy one for you. You'll sit at Boardroom and teach, and if there was a civilian casualty incident, I would fly out, part of the investigation. But the rest of the time I was just there working out and eating nice meals, and occasionally I would go out on patrols when people needed me to, but it was a good tour. But I had some friends that were killed there at that particular one, and because I was at Boardroom, I was part of the ramp ceremonies for them, and I volunteered my time for that. And I think it kind of tore me up a little bit because here we are still in 2012, 10 years later in Afghanistan, seemingly not really going anywhere with it, and still brothers, sisters, coming back, and we're sending them back to Maryland, in a box. So
yeah, it probably difficult. Like while it was a more or less easier time in Afghanistan for your last tour, in that like the workload was different. Just because the workload's different doesn't mean it's actually easier. Like going to what you're saying, like it gives you a lot of time to think about your whole, every time you've gone over there, it's like your final tour might have been a bit slower, but it just is so much extra time to sit and then think so much, which probably wasn't a good thing sometimes.
Right. I mean, I volunteered to go work at the cache when I could for that reason.
Yeah.
I didn't have, maybe everyone has some sort of survivor's guilt, especially if you go over again and again and again. And there were way too many close calls and way too many random things that happened. You kind of, I don't know, when you have time to think, it's certainly not good because you don't want to dwell on that. And sometimes it will still kind of bubble up and you're not real sure why.
And it's not like when you're golfing, when you're home and you're able to golf and take your mind off things for a little bit. I mean, you're there, you're sitting, and it's like a constant reminder of what's happening or what has happened,
Well,
seeing all the military stuff, regardless while you're over there, it would be easy for your brain to just continuously think about that stuff.
Well, way too easy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know this. As far as what's still ongoing with soldiers and sailors, airmen suffering from the after effects, and I hate the word, the PTSD and all that, the stigma behind it. But, I did push through that. I think a lot to do with the supporting family that I had, which I was very fortunate, and figured out ways to move past it. But you're not going to necessarily move past it. It's always going to be there, and I don't want to forget. And I some of the best memories I have and the most cherished I have are with those people. Brothers and sisters that I spent so much time with over there. And then home, even when we were training, and we can look back on it and be like, God, that sucked. Like no showers or JRTC or NTC, these training center rotations that were just utter shit, and they're just preparing us to go back over, having orders, while you're deployed. I'd be in Iraq, and they're like, "Hey, we got your next orders to come back here next year, haha," and I'm like, "I'm not reenlisting."
Yeah.
But all that stuff aside, I mean, there's still some of the best memories I have, and some very dear friends that I still, at least, pay attention to on media, and still talk to. I still have mentors that were very influential that I will send texts to or reach out and tell them how much I appreciate, what they did for me.
Awesome. So the great segue then. How in the world did you get connected to the Catalyst or Dan? You just said that you were finished your Bachelor of Arts, or you finished it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I finished that year in like 2014, like a year later. Then I went to work for XPO Logistics, and for a couple of years there, my wife and I, we were in North Carolina. We had our daughter Hannah at that point, and we realized that we didn't have any family close enough, right? And so we didn't have any babysitters, and we didn't really know.
A kid will bring that up front to show you how much you miss your family being around, for sure.
Right. So the families wanted to see the kiddo, and all of our friends were like young and single. So we didn't really. So like, well, we need to move closer to family and other friends, and we settled on Cincinnati because I liked the city of Cincinnati. I've been here several times, and it looked nice. It was kind of a cool place to live, and it was close enough to her friends and family in Ohio and Columbus, and we had friends here anyway. So we moved to Cincinnati.
Nice. And she was able to do that pretty easily with her job?
Right, as a vet,
Yeah.
So she found a job here. I didn't at first. We moved here. We moved into like a single-story ranch because we didn't really know the area, and we couldn't come out and look for homes. So we moved into Ohio, east side of Cincinnati, and I ended up getting a job with Megacorp Logistics, which is a transportation brokerage, and I did that for almost 3 years up until this past August. So, we had like a year before that, coming on 2 years now, we got pregnant again, and we wanted one more, and instead we got two more. Yeah. James and Landon showed up, and that was a bit of a shock. Excited about boys, but didn't expect two, right?
Yeah.
And that changed my trajectory a lot because I couldn't really do the brokerage thing anymore, which is a lot of work. So right before COVID started, really last year, I was kind of looking at other options, seeing what I could find to try to get something that had better work-life balance and something that wasn't so demanding. And I started networking with my friends here, Cincinnati, my veteran friends. And through them, I actually met Dan. We had a phone conversation back in like June. And then he kind of kept bothering me.
Classic.
Yeah, he called me up again. He's like, "Do you want to do this cohort, this Catalyst program in August? You can start, get back to your MBA." So I was like, "Well, it's not a bad. I think it started in July. I'm sorry." I was like, "That's not a bad idea. I should do it." I had a little under 2 years of benefits left because of the way I'd set up my GI Bill. So I'm like, I had already positioned myself to go for my master's and have it paid for, really, through the GI Bill. So I'm like, this might be the time. COVID was going, transportation was horrible, and I'm like, okay. So I talked to the wife, and she's like, do it now before, we're going to t-ball games and soccer and gymnastics every weekend, and you can't do it. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And it was rough going through that because I was like sun up, sun down. I would really get up in the morning, 7:30, start working until about 6 o'clock at night, which is when class began. And I would just log off and turn off all my phones because I was working from home, and then log right into the Catalyst.
Right.
And start doing school till 9 o'clock at night.
Long day. But what was the Catalyst like? Like, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, so keep in mind, I've been out for a while, so I'd kind of already had a transition, if you will,
Out of
into
the military
civilian.
for a while.
Right. I had 5 years of industry experience in logistics at this point. But I saw the value in it, of course, and I met some really cool people, some really wonderful people through the class, and got really connected into the veteran network again. Mm-hmm. I was already working toward it here, but it was such a kind of a nice fellowship to be with veterans again. And telling stories or being around them, and you're like, God, I remember that, or,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So there's a connection there that I think we should always go back to with veterans, knowing it's kind of corny because you look at like the VFW, and everyone, I always laugh, they're like, hey, you need to get connected to the VFW. And I'm like, I don't really like Bud Heavy, and I don't really have a trucker's hat for OIF, right? Mm-hmm. You get this mental, and it's not a stigma. It's like this stereotype that it's like the place for like the old WW veterans to hang out and drink beer. And I'm like, it's not really for me. But I mean, it's changed. And, I'm trying to work toward getting more connected there, particularly bringing in the youth of, my generation to connect again, because that's really why I, did the Catalyst. And of course, in like August, Dan's like, hey, this program, you're working towards your MBA, but you could do better and go to a better school. What about Purdue? And I'm like, sure, I'll go do this tour. And he does what he always does, and he's gonna get mad at me for this. He's like, let's go do that. And then like the day of, he's like, I can't do that. I got something that came up. And he like, right now, look, he just told me today, can you please meet with this person without me? He did it again today. I know, Dan. Sorry, man. It is what it is. He's a busy guy. So, but anyway, he left me there with a retired Navy SEAL, Jesse Burnett. Actually,
Jesse.
Yeah, and Jason McCormick, a sergeant, retired sergeant major. And the three of us did the tour, and then one thing led to another. And 3 weeks later, I was out of that university, and I was signed up for the executive MBA program, and started in September. And as soon as I got accepted into Purdue, I called my boss, and I'm like, I can't do Megacorp. I can't do this job in this college. I've got to leave. And they're like, they understood. It's a really nice company. Mm-hmm. Nothing but good things to say about that company. But it was not going to work. So, I got out of that. And then Dan was already like, I was like, Dan, can you help me? You said you'd help me with a job. He's like, come work for me. And I'm like,
I feel like that's everyone's response to Dan initially. They're like, nah.
He's like, I'm going to be selfish. I remember this. He's like, I don't want to be, I'm going to be selfish here. I want you to come work for me. And I'm like, okay, are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, we're going to, we need to build this up, and your background and your communication skills and whatnot to do this. And, ever since then, I've been going to school and being a dad and really enjoying my kids. They all talk now. Of course, they all fight and do the crazy shit, but at the same time, they'll do things that are awesome. So
and you get to be there to watch it and see it all.
Yeah, that's the most fortunate thing, and really probably the ultimate reason, really, if you want to go back, why I got out of the military. I wanted to be around. It was selfish, I guess, to want to raise your children.
Is it though? I don't know if I call it selfish.
It's complicated, I think.
Yeah.
My life had gone a different route, and I had so many friends that they were divorced, and they didn't see their children, and I grew up in a very like I said, tight knit family, and I wanted to be there for them, so I made that choice.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, and then one question, going back to the Catalyst for a second. So you took the course, then Dan, what benefit do you think, aside from being able to be around other veterans, obviously you ended up, thanks to Dan, really going for a different MBA at a different university. Like, what effect did that have on your life, or do you see it as being hugely beneficial? Was it different than the one that you were enrolled in, in any way?
I mean, Purdue's the one we were in is a smaller school in Ohio. Purdue's fairly big tier 1 or whatever you want to call it, Big Ten school. So it was a much bigger brand, way more connected. And when you get your MBA, I think it's important to note that you're your networking. That's what's going to make it so valuable. That's why the big prestigious schools like Harvard and Wharton, it's the connections that you meet there
Absolutely.
and you make. So it made more sense to do that. Plus, we plan on staying in the Midwest, right? We plan on being here, and so getting a degree through a big Midwest school made so much sense anyway.
Right, for sure. For sure. And a final question then, I guess we've gone I don't even know if we've gone over time quite yet. What are you doing with the Catalyst now?
All right, so whatever they need me to do. Yeah, so I mean, I run the marketing. I'm tied into marketing. I'm tied into recruiting, and then I manage the CRM, the database for our candidates, and get the information over to the universities and work with them on the enrollment process. And then I also, and will eventually shift away from the CRM recruiting role into business development with finding companies that want to partner with us to, that have solid career options for veterans that go through our program so that we can connect them and then get our veterans those careers where they're not underemployed, where they don't get a job, they get a career.
Sure. Yeah, that's the whole goal is to get them somewhere that they're happy and they're not underemployed.
Right. I mean, the whole reason I accepted this role, if you will, was because I saw the benefit of expediting the transition process for veterans to get them into their post-military life and on a path quicker than what it took for me.
Nice. I mean, unfortunate that you didn't have it for you at the time when you got out, but I love it that's the reason why you're here, for the Catalyst, to help.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, for me, it's all about the veterans and making sure that we can try to take care of them because we all are veterans, or at least, most of us. I mean, you're not, but that's okay.
Veteran connected, both my parents. Military brat.
But I mean, that's my reason for being here.
That's your why.
That is my why. But it's a good why.
It's great.
And I use my experience to try to help help. If I can place these people, and plus it works. I mean, one of the people that I went through the cohort with in August, his name's Keith. He'll be on our show one day. Mm-hmm. It changed his life tremendously. He moved from Florida with his family of 4 children and his wife. They moved from Florida up to Michigan, and he started a completely different career. And he's a lot busier and happier now for it. So that was a tremendous change for him, courtesy of what he got through the Catalyst and the career opportunity that worked out for him.
And it wasn't just moving for the job. He also, if I remember, I haven't met him yet personally, I don't think, but I think somebody was saying that they wanted that move. Like, it wasn't just a move for the career. He got the career and the city, like both things that he wanted, if I'm correct.
Well, he wanted out of Florida.
Yeah.
He didn't like living in the state of Florida for a myriad of reasons. But he wanted to change. He wanted to move up to the Midwest. I think he really wants to go to Indianapolis to be closer to everyone here. Mm-hmm. They have a facility, I think, that they're potentially looking at, that company that he works for there, GLR. I guess I can say that. We're partnered with them. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Either way, I think he's happy. He's happier doing that. He's doing something more enjoyable, more beneficial to him. Of course, he's getting paid more too, which is nice for him. So all those things worked out well. Which is typical of Catalyst graduates. Yeah, definitely. I mean, for those people that that we do place, I had nothing but good things, right? Yeah. Yeah, I forget what the pay increase generally is, but I think I remember Dan saying in the $20,000 to $30,000 average pay increase. Well, something I don't know. We could double check that for next week, but I think it is something kind of crazy high like that. Well, most of the time, like if you're right. I mean, veterans. There's a common perception problem with veterans about how they like personally brand themselves, if you will. And that doesn't mean, with an actual cattle brand or something for all you people out there. No, the personal brand is how you convey who you are and how you build this perception around you, particularly when you go into employers, because a lot of veterans do some really intensive and crazy, some of it's cool shit and some of it's actually like valuable to the business world in ways that they don't know, and they're not always the best at translating it, and oftentimes they're very humble, which is a very good quality. But when you're getting into these corporate mindsets, a lot of times it's mistaking for like meekness, or they're unsure. But if you place the veterans in those positions and then ask them to perform, suddenly that's all changed. And we're trying to get past that. And there's a perception thing that needs to change, particularly not only for veterans themselves and how they carry themselves and translate their skills into that setting, but then how employers see them, and not necessarily as like a equal opportunity check mark,
Yes.
As opposed to, these veterans are, quality employees. And a lot of them find out this, a lot of the people that these companies, when I was hired at XBO, they took a chance. And then like a month later, they were like, chance well taken, well earned. This is, a good hire.
They're like, this is awesome.
Right. And it's hard to say, like, I feel like you're talking about yourself.
Because you want to be humble still.
Right. But I mean, it's true.
Definitely. So,
I'm not suggesting you go out there and suddenly you're an arrogant, person that's full, you're hot shit, as we used to say in the military. No, you can do both. You can have a balance, but veterans certainly need to communicate who they are and what they've done more clearly. And that's something else that we try to focus on at Catalyst. Not that I'm promoting it, not straight promoting it, but I mean, we do focus on helping that veteran transition and build their personal brand. It's very important for us to get them to understand that and to start kind of accepting what they've done and how it translates into a career. So they're not, getting a job where they're like extremely underemployed and then in turn extremely unhappy because they realize that, but they don't realize that until they're in that
right.
job.
They've wasted time. They've started the job. They might be in it a year, and then the idea sometimes of starting again can be so difficult, but once you find that your reason why and that career that you really love and are excited about, I mean, it's life-changing, I think.
I would definitely argue too. You said waste of time. I think people need to know that it's never a waste of time.
Yes.
Maybe like you never should. And I'm not like trying to. Unless you think I'm like coming down or anything like that. What I want to take away from that is I don't think people should ever view like a job that didn't work out or something they didn't like as a waste of time, but as a value-added experience. Once again, veterans moving into the right perspective of post-military, yes, it's different, but use it as a valuable experience and learn from it, and then figure out what you want to do, because there are going to be jobs out there that work perfectly for you and your level of weirdness and your things. You're going to find something, but you always have to be looking, and you always have to accept that if something didn't work out or if the job wasn't perfect as you saw it, figure out what you learned from it. It's really important that you do that.
Definitely. Yeah, I guess that's thinking like reverse end is that's my worry sometimes with people is that they're a year in, and then the thought of changing is just so scary because they think, well, I've kind of committed now, I'm this far in. It's like making that switch to being ready to find that next thing that is going to be good for you. Like that step alone, I think, can be so difficult to commit to for some people. I mean, maybe not Dan. We'll tell the story about how Dan decided to commit to
there's
next life.
There's a stigma out there that I'm learning through business school right now that needs to be lifted, and it's this idea that my stepfather, he's old school, right? He's a salesman through and throughout his career. He still has this mentality of, hey, you got to land at the right spot right now because you're gonna be too old and you're not gonna have other options, and that is completely not true anymore.
Yeah.
People are moving 3 to 5 years out of their careers, sometimes doing completely different ones, but still having somewhat learning from the relevant experience. This is a common occurrence now. People people don't have the spend 30 years and then get your, your trophy and then your retirement. Like we don't do that anymore.
Yep.
It's 3 to 5 years. You're probably transitioned to a new company, either because you couldn't promote vertically or you wanted to try something like horizontally different. And
Yep.
it's accepted. In this day and age, it's accepted. There
Absolutely.
are very few industries out there where they're like, relevant experience is it. You must be this particular person with this particular skills. That's not as true as it used to be anymore. Like obviously a doctor or a veterinarian, different. I'm talking about
corporate.
There's so many different industries. There's so many different careers out there that will align to your experience, and you shouldn't feel that you should be confined to it. You shouldn't also, jump every 6 months to a different job. I'm not suggesting that. But this idea that you must stay within this company is like some kind of loyalty or whatever. Now that's kind of ingrained into us in the military too, for sure, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's a call to service and a commitment to that culture. But it's not really like that anymore, and you don't have to feel confined to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think that about sums it up for today. Is there anything else you want to add, Jacob?
No, I've talked a lot today.
You talked a lot. All right. I have one thing I want to add, and it's a surprise, Jacob, to both. Well, you'll get it next week, but for last week when we interviewed Blake, or you guys will hear it from last week, Blake, who I know can hear me talking right now, I wrote to Dan, the CEO, and each week when I interview somebody from the Catalyst, like one of our teammates who work in the Catalyst, I want to, a week after, get a little comment from Dan about who that person is and, something that he thinks about you. So I left it very open to Dan. And what I said, I just asked him, let me see if we might have to edit this a little bit, but I asked Dan if he could write a single sentence to describe how you feel about Blake. And his response, Blake, was that Blake is the inspiration for me to believe the Catalyst program could become a real thing. To have him join us as a teammate is, for me, a dream come true. So, Blake, that's kind of for you. Jacob, I guess I kind of ruined the surprise because you're here listening now for that, so you'll get yours next week. But for anyone who didn't hear Blake's interview, that's how the CEO feels about Blake, and it's pretty awesome. And Jacob, I'm excited for next week to get Dan's one-sentence answer to how he feels about you, so that anybody who listens to next week's podcast, if they didn't hear us talking, Jacob, you and I, from this week, they can circle back and get all the info about you. All right, I think that about wraps it up. And next week we will have Jacob. Who are we interviewing next week?
Dan Haverstadt, I think.
Yeah, Haverstadt.
Yeah, I hope I said that right.
Same. So next week we'll have Dan Haverstadt.
He's an Air Force guy. We finally got an fellow Air Force guy on the show.
Nice.
These Army guys, crayon eaters running around here.
I kind of love that joke because I hadn't heard it before talking to all you guys here. So.
Well, what's funny is that if I tell them that, then they'll just say that that's what the Marines do, and I'm like, just pass it on.
Yeah. Actually, and I have noticed that already. I've heard somebody else say that. That's funny. All right. So, thanks again for listening to the Boots to Boardroom podcast hosted by the Catalyst program, and we will see you guys next week.
If you'd like to learn more about the Catalyst program and possibly attend one of our classes, please visit us at thecatalystprogram.org. Or if you'd like to find out more about possibly being a guest on our show, you can email me at blake.miles@thecatalystprogram.org. Just let me know what you're all about, and we'll see what we can do.